Hello everyone, this is Paige from Mosaic Moments, and welcome to part 6 of the Designing Mosaics series. Today I'm going to be talking about contrast, but before I do that, I want to remind you to be sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. We would love for you to be updated on any video or really dye tutorials and more upcoming videos of the design series. So a lot of people miss out on these videos, so be sure to hit the subscribe button so you can be updated on our future videos. Anyway, so contrast in design, which you've probably have heard the term contrast before. Contrast in design is when two or more elements on your page are different. And I'm going to explain throughout the video why contrast is important. So let's go ahead and get started with our first example. So for many people, when they hear the word contrast, they may automatically think of colors such as black and white. And color is certainly one way to create contrast on your layout, but there's actually many different ways. So again, contrast in design is when two or more elements, so in this case on a scrapbook layout, two or more of your elements are different. So on this layout here, which I love, I just did this one recently, you're generally speaking going to have contrast with your photos on the background. You notice this page, if you look at the grid paper and the outline and the photo mats, they're all kind of this darker purple, right? But the photos stand out on them because they look very bright on those dark colors. So for most of you, you're probably going to have some sort of contrast between the colors you put on your layout and the photos you place on top. So I changed the layout, so now the 4 photos in the center were taken indoors and very low lighting, and they're all very dark. And then the loop border on the outer edges, I darkened those photos as well. And you could probably see that these photos since they are dark and the background's dark, they don't have as much contrast as the previous layout. So it's really important from the beginning when you're starting a layout to pick a background color that your photos are going to stand out on. So if it has darker lighting like these photos, you may actually want a lighter background because they'll stand out more in that. And that's part of why contrast is important, especially for your photographs, because you want them to get a lot of attention on your layout. So here's a comparison of the two layouts, and your eye probably went to the layout on the left, and it's because of the contrast. You can see there's a darker background and the lighter photos look really nice. They really stand out, and I did this on purpose. I had the darker background because I knew those photographs would stand out a lot on that darker background. So contrast is really important for your photographs so those stand out more. Now on the right, that page doesn't really stand out because there really isn't a lot of contrast between the background and the photos. And you can see between the two pages on the right, you feel like you wish there was something a little bit more. It's all too much the same. The lighting of the entire page is pretty much the same. It's all dark. The solution there would be to use a lighter background for the darker photos to stand out on. So that's really important when you're choosing a background for your photographs. Make sure the photographs stand out on that background. All right, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can use color for contrast. This layout, a lot of people really love, and I think a big reason for that is because of the contrast. So the contrast here, you can see the grid paper is a brown, and there's brown paper mats, and there's also green paper mats. So they're all these earth tones, right? But what stands out is those bright red tomatoes. And the reason why they stand out is because there's all these earth tones, they're very neutral. Brown is a very neutral color, and so that the red of the tomatoes really pops on this because it's so different. It's not an earth tone. It's not green or brown there. It's this bright red that really stands out, and that is one way you can do this. I love having earth tones such as browns or neutrals like grays, and then having like this pop of colors such as red or blue or yellow, whatever you have, it really stands out and creates contrast on your layout. So, two reasons why contrast is important is one, visual interest. Your page may seem dull without having some sort of contrast. And the second reason is it determines the hierarchy on your layout, and that would be your focal point. So, a lot of the examples I'm going to show today are going to be contrast with the focal point and the secondary parts of the layout. So, here, one easy way you can create contrast in your layout is by using light and dark colors. So in the middle here, my focal point is surrounded by this white pattern paper, and that really stands out on this darker background. And also around the X Factor dies, I have also another dark blue. And so because I use a lot of dark colors, the middle looks really contrasting because I used that white, and it makes the focal point stand out a lot. So again, one way you can create contrast is by using dark and light colors. So a big reason to apply design principle contrast to your layouts is because you want your layout to be visually interesting. So what I love about this layout right here is the middle has that panorama, and the outline is this light aqua color. Now I did choose a dark background so that light color really stands out on that dark brown. But also what I love is, so if you look at all the photos here, there's a lot of earth tones like browns and greens. There's also a little bit of orange, a little bit of reds. And so in this case, I used that blue on purpose because I knew it would stand out with these fall colors. Now aqua's kind of become a kind of a trendy fall color, so that's part of the reason why I chose it, but I also knew it would stand out on this layout because the color is very different from the rest. It's not the neutrals, it's not an earth tone, right? So this is kind of a surprise element for the layout. You wouldn't maybe expect an aqua color on a fall page, so do something a little unexpected, like a different color to create contrast. Another way I love to add contrast to layout is using lots of bright colors, and then to make my photos stand out more, I make them black and white. And this is great contrast because all the bright colors, they can seem overwhelming. And so the black and white photos are simple. So if you have a lot of complex elements going on, the way to contrast that is doing something simple. So again, here, there's a lot of bright colors going on, and I think using color photographs could have been a little too overwhelming. So my solution to make the photographs stand out more and create contrast is by using black and white photographs. All right, so I covered a lot on color, so now I'm going to go into other ways you can create contrast. And one of those ways is by using pattern paper, which I'm sure a lot of you love using pattern paper. So here, if you notice, most of the page has just plain cardstock for the photo mats, except for in the center, Jody used pattern paper. So having one element on your page have a pattern to it and the rest of it be the plain cardstock does create contrast, and in this case it helps the focal point stand out a lot more, and it actually helps the pattern papers pop a lot as well. So this layout has the corner strip dies, which I really love. And I also really enjoy doing this technique where you notice there's the center, which stands out, of course, because it's the only full photograph. We'll say everything else is cut up. And then after that, I have the photo, the flower photos, and then it's the pattern paper, and then the flower photos again. Of course, the outer edges, I could have made it so it was all the flower photos. But it actually stands out more because of the contrast between the photos and the pattern paper. The pattern paper kind of gives this page a more organized feel, which is one good thing about contrast, is it kind of gives an organization to your layout. And again, it helps it pop more because there's something unexpected and visually interesting about breaking up the photographs with that pattern paper. Another way to create contrast on your layout is by using different shapes. So on this layout, most of my photographs are cut into circles. I use the circle tile die here, two different shapes of it. And in the middle, you can see I just left that photo as a square. I did do that on purpose because I wanted that to stand out when everything else or all the other photographs are all circles, right? And it could be the other way around where my middle photograph was a circle shape and then everything else was square. So when you're using different shapes, think about how you can make your page visually interesting. You can also cut one photograph differently from the rest. So here I use the 4x6 strip frame die, and I really love this layout because you notice everything else is the common rectangle or square shaped photograph, but in the middle it is more visually interesting because it's the only one cut in a unique way. The same idea applies here. You may notice that the top photograph is the only one on this page cut into a mosaic. And you can do the same thing with the strip dies as well. I love doing it. So there's one photo that was cut in the strips and the rest of them are just solid squares or rectangles. So this does give your page contrast and it's very visually interesting. So here I really love this layout because of the contrasting shapes. So you can see the photos on the outer edges, they're all the typical rectangle shape. But in the middle you have this very unique kind of a double diamond shape, and it really stands out because it's so different from the rest of the layout and even very different for a lot of different scrapbook pages. So this is in the middle. I used the 2x3 box kite die, which allows you to create unique shapes like this. So this is another way to add contrast, is making one element a very unique shape from the rest of the layout. Alright, so I have a fairly simple layout here, but it still has a couple of contrasting elements. One of it's in the middle. It has my middle photograph has a white background and it's the only one that's matted. So that is one way to add contrast, is leave one of your photos matted and the rest of them are not matted. And also the other contrasting element is the one photograph that's cut into strips, and it's the only one in the layout, so it helps it stand out more. So again, very simple ways of adding contrast. You want at least one or two items on your layout that are a little bit different. Now I changed this up a little because I do want to warn, even though contrast is really important, you don't want to make it everything contrasting. Again, usually you only want one, two, maybe three things tops that are a little bit different. But here I have the same elements as before, but now also two of my photographs are cut into mosaic squares, and then I put on two black outlines with the crisscross dies. There's just a lot going on here, and so when you're applying contrast, you have to remember our other design principles such as balance and harmony. Right here, it's not very harmonious and it's just too contrasting. There's too much going on. So yes, it is possible to apply too much contrast on your layout. So here's a side-by-side comparison, and on the right layout I keep wanting to look at the black crisscross outlines. They're just so contrasting and they actually take away from the focal point, and we want to make sure the focal point is the hierarchy of the layout. And on the right, there's just so much going on. The left flows better. So remember, when you're applying contrast, to still apply other design principles such as balance and rhythm and harmony. I feel like on the right, it's not a very harmonious layout now. And something to remember when you're making a scrapbook layout is less is more and simple is better. So when you're applying design principle contrast, you only really need one or two elements that are very different. Everything else still needs to be in harmony and balanced. So even though we really want to use all of our dies on a layout, you really need to take a step back and only choose maybe one, two tops to apply on your layout, or else it's going to look a little more chaotic. One way to add contrast is the orientation of your photographs. What I love about this layout is that center photograph is the only one in the layout that's horizontal. In fact, it's the only shape on the entire layout that is horizontal. So that is a way to make something stand on your page, is make it the only one that's either vertical or horizontal, or maybe the only one that's square. So I briefly brought this up before, but using a different size mat for your photograph can be contrasting. So you notice here the other photographs have kind of thinner mats around them. The top photograph has that a lot of space on the bottom, and I was able to fit the word Biltmore there, which was fantastic. But it also stands out because the matting's so different from everywhere else. Now, I don't do this a lot, and I would only do it to one photograph in your layout, but that is one way to create contrast, is having a different size mat. Another way to create contrast is combining simple elements with busy elements. So here the busy part is the mosaic. Mosaics can kind of look a little bit busy because it's a bunch of 1-inch squares, right? And so what I love is Tammy added in the brown cardstock areas for the journaling, and that really adds a simple element to the layout. It gives your eye a place to rest amongst the busyness. So if you're finding your layout is really busy, you can contrast it and balance that with an element that's simple. Here I created contrast by having some distressed elements, which some of you love, some people don't love that. But what I love about a Mosaic Moments layout is that even when I personally add distressed elements, there's still an organized feel on the layout because everything else is so neat and straight. So here I have the distressed element in the middle, and the numbers and the 2 1x3 dice kind of look distressed also, but everything else is just a clean cut photograph. And that's what I like to do, is the neat and clean with the distressed. That's another way to add contrast, is having some elements be kind of grungy or distressed and everything else looks beautiful and clean and neat. So that's a fun way to create contrast on your layout. All right, this is the last layout of the video. The last one I want to talk about is scale. And I do have a link to the article below the video, and I definitely think you should go check out that article. I have another great example about scale. So scale can mean you have a bunch of 1-inch squares on your page and you have like one big photograph in the middle. But here what I love is Jody has the little palm trees, right? And then she has that huge 2020. And she could have just left it so that sunny paper was just there. But I just love that she added the 2x2 numbers in here because of the scale. There's this huge numbers and the little palm trees. So adding things at a different scale is a really fun way to add interest and contrast to your layout. All right, we have reached the end of today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for watching the series. Again, I've really enjoyed doing this, and I hope you guys are learning a lot and seeing your pages improve after each video. And again, don't forget to apply the rest of the design principles when you're adding contrast to your layout, and go back and watch them if you need a refresher if you haven't seen them already. And what I love about contrast is that is what makes your pages stand out, really, is putting in these contrasting elements, and it makes your pages more interesting. All right, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to click below the video to view our article about contrast to see more examples. All right, I hope you guys have a fun time scrapping at home, and I'll see you next time.